In the quiet streets of Amsterdam and Rotterdam, a sound rises, clear, melodic, and deeply symbolic. It echoes not just across neighborhoods, but across time. This is the Islamic call to prayer, the Azan, threading its way into the soundscape of modern Europe. But the journey of this ancient voice, echoing from minarets and loudspeakers, is far from simple. It is a story of longing and resistance, of faith and fear, of old worlds remembered and new homes still in negotiation. In this documentary, we follow that voice through the intricate corridors of European history, focusing on the Netherlands, a country where tolerance and discomfort often walk hand in hand. The Azan originates in 7th century Arabia. The Prophet Muhammad appointed Bilal ibn Rabah, a former African slave, as the first muezzin. It was Bilal's voice, echoing from rooftops, that invited the faithful to prayer. His call was more than a summons. It was a declaration of dignity and equality, echoing Islam's message of racial and spiritual unity. From its inception, the Azan carried profound symbolic weight. Its verses, affirming God's greatness and the centrality of prayer, were uttered by human voice, untouched by instrumentation. Yet this purity would soon encounter the pressures of modernity. By the 1920s and 30s, Dutch newspapers were already reporting on the modernization of Islam, highlighting the use of loudspeakers for the Azan in cities like Mecca, Istanbul, and Singapore. One article hailed it as progress, while another mourned the loss of the living voice, replaced by what it called the lifeless loudspeaker. In 1908, Dutch Orientalist Christian Snoek Hurgronje recorded the Azan in Jeddah, a delicate, unamplified voice woven into the quiet of a pre-modern city. These recordings, now archived in Leiden, offers a glimpse into a very different soundscape, one defined not by technology, but by breath, rhythm, and tradition. The Netherlands' own encounter with the Azan was shaped by its colonial history. Dutch control over Indonesia and contact with Suriname and the Antilles brought familiarity with Muslim practices. But it wasn't until the 1950s, when Pakistani immigrants built the first mosque in The Hague, that the Azan gained a foothold in Dutch cities. In the decades that followed, Turkish and Moroccan guest workers arrived, often praying in small improvised spaces, garages, factories, empty basements. The Azan was present but quiet. Televised images and airplane journeys brought it into public awareness, often with surprise, sometimes with discomfort. In 1968, a journalist suggested that both church bells and the Azan were outdated relics, symbols of forced religion in a supposedly enlightened world. Yet, secularism in the Netherlands was shifting. No longer defined purely by Protestant dominance, the country was inching toward a more pluralistic understanding of public life. A major turning point came with the Public Manifestations Act of 1988, which legally permitted the amplification of the Islamic call to prayer. But even before that, local municipalities had begun to experiment. In cities like Leiden and The Hague, mosques were allowed to broadcast the Azan once a week, usually on Fridays. Officials likened it to the ringing of church bells. For some, this was a meaningful gesture of equality. For others, it was an uncomfortable reminder of a changing nation. Politicians from Christian parties objected, warning against the erosion of Christian culture. One Dutch Muslim convert, Abdulwahid van Bommel, was skeptical. Would the law truly protect Muslim expression? In time, it would prove surprisingly effective, offering legal cover even when public opinion remained hostile. Perhaps no story captures these tensions better than the Turkish Center Mosque in Deventer. In 2012, the mosque announced plans to broadcast the Azan daily. The reaction was swift. Neighbors expressed dismay not just at the volume, but at the religious content of the sound. They wanted neutrality, they said. They didn't want to be reminded of Islam every day. Orkan Yücel, the mosque's chairman, and a second-generation Dutch Turk, tried to bridge the gap. He argued that the call wasn't obligatory, but deeply meaningful, especially for older immigrants who longed for the sounds of their childhood. The Azan, he said, was part of their right to feel at home. But negotiations quickly soured. Residents accused the mosque of imposing its will. Yücel pointed to the sacrifices of Turkish workers who had helped build the Dutch economy. In the end, a compromise was reached. One call per day, between noon and 2 p.m., limited to 57 decibels. It was a legal victory, but a costly one. The emotional toll on Yücel was so great that he considered returning to Turkey. Tolerance, he said, is no longer what it used to be. Similar tensions flared in Enschede between 2015 and 2016. There, opposition was even fiercer, culminating in protests and an arson attack on a mosque. Some local politicians rejected public expressions of Islam altogether, arguing that faith should remain behind the front door. They saw the Azan not as a protected right, but as an intrusion, linked in their eyes to foreign influence and authoritarian politics abroad. In response to such hostility, new forms of Islamic aesthetics emerged, attempts to adapt the Azan to European sensibilities. One of the most striking innovations was the light Azan, replacing sound with a beam of light sent upward from a minaret-like tower. Warm, white light, meant to symbolize openness and spiritual ascent, became a kind of visual prayer. In 2003, the idea took shape in a proposed polder mosque designed by Ergun Erkoçu and a team of architecture students. The mosque would have no loudspeaker, only a shaft of light. It was a gesture of peace, an offering of compromise. Similar designs followed in Rotterdam, in Hoofddorp, and in Utrecht, where glass minarets glowed at prayer times. These innovations were met with mixed reactions. Some Dutch politicians praised the creativity. Others saw it as empty symbolism. And many Muslim worshippers, when asked, hadn't even noticed the lights. For them, the Azan was not just light. It was language, melody, memory. Scholars at institutions like Al-Azhar questioned whether a light could ever replace a voice. After all, the Azan is not just information, it is experience. It moves through air and enters the heart. Its very form, a human voice in Arabic, carries centuries of tradition. Changing that form raises a deeper question. Can the essence of a religious practice survive if its form is altered to please others? This is the question explored in Pooyan Tamimi Arab's broader work on religious forms. These forms, what we touch, see, and hear in religion, are not superficial. They are essential. The material is tied to the spiritual. Whether it's a prayer rug, a crucifix, or a minaret, these elements shape how believers feel and practice their faith. But what happens when society insists that those forms must change? When neutrality is defined not by fairness, but by invisibility? The journey of the Azan in the Netherlands reflects this tension. It shows us how pluralism is not just a principle, but a process, a slow, often painful negotiation of rights, memories, and fears. It reminds us that for many Muslims, the Azan is more than a call to prayer. It is a call to belonging, a call to be seen, a call to be heard. And so we return to where we began, to that voice rising above rooftops, echoing in a language that many don't understand, but that many long to feel accepted. In today's Europe, shaped by migration, memory, and political anxiety, the sound of the Azan still stirs deep emotions. It draws lines between inclusion and exclusion, recognition and rejection, and it asks us to reflect, what does it mean to belong? Who decides what counts as noise and what counts as culture? And what future awaits the Azan in the soundscape of Europe? Is it a fading echo or a rising voice? You decide.